Hello everybody, welcome to the new video. I'm DuckFaden07 and this is another iteration of the Zoo archetype. This time we are playing the Cascade version. Okay, so the Cascade version most often consists of playing Bloodbraided Elf, playing a Shardless Agent, and um, some usual stuff like binding Territorial Cowl, Cyan Draco, and Shoba Brawler, and combining a lot of these multicolor spells with General Affairs Rokiric, which is just a great metagame option against a lot of matchups that basically his biggest weakness is Ren and 6. But even again in that matchup, if you play him smart, he can do a lot there. So you have a lot of creatures in the deck, which and Fury, which can also help getting rid of the Ren, clearing the way for the General Affairs to dominate the game with 4/4 Golem tokens. And it's very easy to swarm the board with the tokens fast and just get it out of control and win the game. Okay, so other than that, we are playing 4 Manamorphos. So Manamorphos, it's a great synergy with General Affairs Rokiric, and it's good in a deck because it's a card that replaces itself, and this deck just don't want to play a whole lot of other cards that are not these cards that you see on the screen. So we really want to play these cards, and we don't want to play a lot of other cards, maybe few of them, depending on the meta game, and you're feeling what is going to your meta to look like, or if you're playing online, uh, what's current online meta shaping to be, and what you get to just make some choices. Okay, so we have don't have a lot of removal here, so just 4 Leyline bindings and 4 Furies in the main. But we have a lot of these pretty aggressive creatures, and uh, we mostly just need a few of removals for the first game, and we always have very strong creatures to trade with our opponent's strong creatures, or just try to raise the opponent, whatever. Okay, so that is the reason why in this version we are playing some additional removal on the sideboard. We have 2 Terminates on the side. And other than that, some usual stuff like MTGO for combo hate in this version. So Cindervines, very good. My favorite Blood Moon hate for Cascade versions of the deck. We have 3 Force of Figures. We have a lot of green cards in the deck. And Force of Figure is a premium artifact enchantment removal. We have, of course, Rest in Peace, the best graveyard hate in the game. 2 Lavinias that help us against opponents, Leyline Bindings, Furies, Solitudes, also Cascade matchups, and a lot of stuff. So, other than that, we are playing one of Ragavan. I don't like a lot of Ragavans in these archetypes, like maybe um, 1 or 2 is mostly ideal. So I decided to go with one in this archetype in favor of a 23rd land. You could maybe play 2 instead of 1 land, or 4th Nishoba Brawler, or 4th General Ferris Rokirk. Over the past few days, I did a few played a few leagues with slightly different iterations of the deck, and I mostly played 3 General Affairs Rokiric, 22 land, and no Ragavan, but I had those 3 as some flex spots, and I tried different stuff in it. So I played a few leagues with a few different choices in those places, and this league we are going to watch. In that league, I played 2 Goblin Archomancers and 1 Force of Figure in the main, just to kind of test some stuff and to see how those cards uh, feel in the deck. I can't say that I'm too happy about Goblin Archomancers. They're decent with the brawler in the deck. It's a strong turn 3 play like turn 3 Archamancer brawler, and then you can really do some nasty stuff on turn 4, but it's very situational and very hard to pull up, and it's going to happen very, very rarely, so I don't think it's good option. So other than that, in this league, I played one Force of Figure in the main. Force of Figure has been one probably one or the most sideboardable card in this whole sideboard, and I decided to go with one in the main. One Force of Figure in the main can really help first game against this form of artifact decks like especially Hammer Time, but also Affinity and these new versions of Affinity with that Forge card, or even can help with matchups that play Blood Moon in the main, for example, stuff like that. But I think this version is pretty solid against Blood Moon. We have Manamorphos, we have Furies. I just need one white mana to cast the General and Leyline Binding that helps us deal with Moon. Um, Other cards are also castable off of one forest, one basic forest, and that's it. So I think this is the ideal version of a deck. The gameplay you will see, as I said, it's not this exact version. We had three cards is different, but I put this version for everyone to see in the front because I think this is the optimal version of a deck, and there are some obvious best inclusions you can play instead. For example, you can play two Teferis instead of Raguan, and third general or fourth general or fourth Shoba. You can also play stuff like two lightning helixes, other typical stuff you see in these lists. But I think this is pretty much the optimal version in my opinion right now. Um, of course, if you play against a lot of Cascade decks, then two Teferis in the main will probably be a better option, or even the option I like in the matchups that contain a lot of the strange matchups, combo decks, Amulet Titan, um, and these kind of decks that this deck is just not really great against. I really prefer playing some two up to three meddling mages in the main, and they can be pretty good if you know your opponent's deck well, and if you know how to use them. So I think meddling mages could be a great main board option for some meta games where this deck just doesn't perform as well as you would want it. And I think Meddling Mage can help with these combo matchups, or a lot of weird matchups, or 50-50 matchups like maybe Belcher, stuff like that. Um, okay, so mana base. In the mana base, we are playing four Wooded Foothills, which is the best fetch in this deck. We're playing three Heats, three Strands, and three Messes. So we're playing three Messes because it gets us, we have to have 7 sources to get our Blood Crypt. We are playing a Windswept Heat, three Windswept Heats, because it's the best land that gets both of our basics. It doesn't get us one of the triumphs, which is not great, and but that's the reason why we're playing just 3 and not 4. And if you're playing 22 lands in some different versions, like adding some kind of ramp and stuff, I would cut third heat and leave 3 strand, 3 messes in. Strand is the second best fetch here, but we have to play split between Strand and Mesa, uh, because Mesa gets us the Blood Crypt. Okay, so that's it in the sideboard. As I said, in these versions, I have two terminates because I lack some removals in the main. We're playing other than that. I went through that before, so we'll just go through some gameplay. Okay, so first two games were Domain Zoo Mirrors. So I played first, but I had to mulligan to 5. Fortunately, that was good enough for me. I had the Force of Figure and the two generals, and I mulliganed, of course, second general and the Force of Figure. Force of Figure can be good in this matchup, but it's kind of situational. I would be glad to have it if it's like if I didn't mulligan to 5, but I was in a pretty good situation here. I decided it's better to just push the 5 damage through than to block the Ragavan. So I just decided to let Ragavan through. My opponent exiled the Fury. I played a Shardless Agent into Nishoba Brawler, and I just wanted to attack one more time, get the ability going again. I traded for cows, played my land, and I was in a pretty good situation with the general on the field, second general in the hand. I jumped the Ragavan, so they don't get the ability. Um, I played Bloodbraid into two multicolor spells, get me 2 tokens and also a Scion on Draco. So I wasn't able to attack this turn, but I was able to trade with Scion and had 2 golems to attack next turn, so it was a pretty good situation for me. I went for attack with the golems, leaving my opponent on 3 life, making another golem token with another general, and that's it. My opponent had a binding. They had a Kavu. Okay, sorry. That was it. That was game 1, match 1. So, game 2, match 2. I'm on the draw, so I think this Cascade version is favored to win. In this matchup, but my opponent also did a mistake this game. I think it was probably an unintentional mistake. They fetched the Temple Garden here. They probably wanted to fetch the land with the blue source, so they were in a pretty bad situation here because they didn't have a blue source at the moment, so their cow didn't trade with my cow, and I had enough time. Okay, so I played Brawler and Nakato. I left all my creatures back. I didn't want my opponent to get some damage through and try to Tribal Flames me. They did have 1 Tribal Flames in hand. So I just decided to remove the first strike from Cowl. My opponent was on 0 cards here. So they went for Cowl ability and I gladly traded with Nishoba Brawler. Having 2 very good cards in hand in this situation just puts me in a pretty good situation. It wasn't very important. My plays here weren't that important. I decided to just kill the fairy and play the scion, threaten the lethal next turn. My opponent had a decent draw, so they were able to. Okay, so I did get Fury, and I thought they maybe have the Leyline Binding, so I was going for Lethal, but they had even better than that. Their Tear was very good, so they were able to kill two of my cards, a chump, sorry, block the. Um, they couldn't attack because Shardless or Lethal just killed their Scion, and that was it. So that was match one. Okay, so we'll watch other games first and then watch the defeat in the end. The defeat was also the domain zoo. I kept mediocre hand, not good with lands. My opponent was on some weird version of burn. There was no good. My opponent had all creatures, which was decent against my hand because I had Fury, had Binding, a lot of other removals, and they had just full hand of creatures, and my creatures are bigger here, so I just played a lot of my creatures, played tapped land, and then next turn just went for Fury, killed two of my opponents, and they went for Indestructible, but this was definitely a losing game for my opponent. They didn't have much options in this game, so it was pretty much game over for them. So as you can see, I played the force in the main here. It can be useful in this matchup. You can kill a Dolan, so it's not even dead here. But there was just a lot of these matchups where it was really good, and I decided to try one off in the main. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't very useful in this exact situation. Also, other card I played here is Goblin Archomancer. So it was pretty much useless also in this situation because this game was already over. But I got sorry. This was first game. We'll now watch the second one. I kept again a mediocre hand. Just elf binding fury pretty slow for the burn matchup. I went immediately for Fury on the Spear, and I had the binding on turn 2 for $1. So, sorry about this. I had these pop ups pretty much happening to me all the time. I just haven't been able to get rid of them for some time now. I just can't get rid of them no matter how I try. Okay, so just play the cow here. They were on 0 cards in hand, and I had Hiritsugu flipping, so which means next turn Scion is gonna give him the lifelink, and the game is pretty much over. So my opponent didn't top deck for damage, and that was the game. Okay, so that was the burn. It's not a regular burn. It was some version of burn with the DRC. Didn't feel very good to me. But okay, so we're going next matchups. Next two matchups, it was Murktide and Rakdos Scan. Okay, so I was hoping for my opponent to, as you can see, force a figure wasn't a very good topic here, but in a lot of these situations you can discard it with territorial cabo, and also there's a lot of versions of the Murktide decks that play Blood Moon in the main, so it can be useful in some versions. And I just went for the Fury on Channeler. Uh, didn't want to wait anymore for them to play another creature, so just went Fury immediately and Territorial Cabo, but they got the Delirium from the iteration, and so they were in a pretty good position with 6 cards in hand, 2 channelers, and another heat. It was pretty much game over for me. So I just had the brawler, and I was forced to Fury one of the channelers, so that was pretty much game over. So off to another game. Okay, so I think these kind of hands are very capable. We have Cowl, Scion, our best 2 drops. Not too easy to kill for my opponent. I'm playing first, so I can easily play around Blood Moon with turn 3 planes. And I don't know, I pass the turn, my opponent. I guess they didn't draw a land or whatever. They just conceded game two, or their hand they kept a bad hand or whatever. I don't know. But game three, on the draw, I had Iron Mesa in the hand to go for the basic planes. Turn two, it's not. But I think it was definitely a losing play to do such a thing, and I just decided it's best to go with strong creature on turn two. My opponent got counter on Shredder, and I decided that this Shredder is definitely not something to leave on the field, and I decided to ditch the general to kill the Shredder immediately. Went for the rest in peace with the Shardless, and my opponent wasn't very patient. So when I casted the Scion, they probably had the graveyard dependent hand, and they just probably had some Murktide or Heat or whatever. They just decided to concede the game on casting of the Scion of Draco after Rest in Peace. Okay, so that was it. Okay, so the last win was the Rugby Scam matchup. Okay, so I kept mediocre hand. If it was any other creature, I would just not keep this, but Sign of Draco is so good, and I decided to risk it, to go with it. And 2 Signs of Draco in the starting hand is just it's often enough to win the game. They play my general affairs. Fortunately, it wasn't very good for them. I decided to go with Charlotte this turn, so I have more blockers for the Ragavan. They discarded my Scion with Grief, but fortunately they didn't have multicolor spells. So I was able to stabilize pretty well, played Brawler at Kavu, traded with Grief. I was able to start attacking and doing the Kavu ability and looting cards. Unfortunately, all my draws were bad and I just drew into more lands. But still, I traded with Ragavan, they played another, Sorry, I'm really sorry about this. So I just can't handle these popping up problems, and just trying to find a solution for it, but it's not happening. Okay, so and okay, as you can see, these two anarchomancers weren't really relevant in these games. I mostly just casted them after, in a lot of these situations, after the game was pretty much over. Okay, so that was game one. Okay, so game two had mulligan. This definitely having in with mulligan hand having planes and Leyland binding. It's always pretty much pretty cool in the Ragdos matchup when they play the Blood Moon, so you don't have to worry about fetching. On the right land, you always have planes and binding in your hand, and you can just play a normal game. I could have gone for forest this turn, but this was good enough. My opponent destroys the Nishoba Brawler. I play my fetch to get other basic and having Bloodbraid for the next turn. Bloodbraid went for Charles into Cindervines, so I'm with two basics in the field, Cindervines in the battlefield, so pretty much in a very good situation. If my opponent top decks the Blood Moon, I have the basics, I have the Cindervines, also have the Rest in Peace, which makes around 8 to 10 cards in their deck dead, completely dead. So I just went for Charles, of course, into Monomorphose, drawing me the Kavu, and I was able to play both Rest in Peace and Kavu this turn. I'm pretty satisfied how this Monomorphose worked during these leagues. I stayed back with Charles to trade with this Ragavan. Had the Binding, and they played the third Ragavan, and of course had the Pyromancer to draw two, which is pretty good for them. Okay, I had just the Binding in hand, and I was in a pretty bad situation, but it's easy to get out of this situation with these decks. Because there's just a lot of good top decks going on. So I was able to kill the third Dragon, and my opponent had another Spyro to draw another two cards, and I had my Scion, but unfortunately my opponent played a Fury, which is pretty much a perfect draw for them in this situation. And I was in pretty bad shape right now, so I needed some good top decks, but I got them. I had to play the Fury, play the Cascaders, the Bindings, obviously very good. So there's just a lot of top decks I can get that just make this made my situation much better. So I was able to play the Kavu, uh, and pretty quickly the tables turn, and I have the Fury. I have the Cindervines to deal additional 2 damage to my opponent, destroying the Blood Moon, making KO 5/5, and now it's pretty much hopeless for my opponent. They're 2 life, just with a lot of these undying spells in hand, and that's it. Okay, so we'll now watch the loss. The loss was against Mirror. Um, also, Cascade version. If they played first, which is very relevant. If I didn't play, if I didn't play this, let's say, bad cards in a deck like Goblin Anarchomancer, I would probably win this game. If this Anarchomancer was like um, general or maybe I don't know, like Helix or Teferi, I would be in a lot better situations. Also, I drew into a few brawlers, which uh, wasn't very good here. My opponent had a good cascade with the elf. Self is definitely problematic. I just got another land here, so a lot of lands, and they got another Bloodbraid elf and Tribal Flames to face, and that's pretty much game over. So um, up to game two. Game two, I should have won the game two definitely. Mm, should have won the game two. It wasn't a big misplay, but I could have possibly think that's the only way they can beat me and just play things a bit differently. Um, I don't think it was. I didn't think it was a big misplay because they had just one card in hand in that situation. I decided against. Uh, I decided against going against Fury here. I just wanted to Sidner Vines the Scion next turn. Kill their Scion. If I went for the Fury, it could have been maybe a better option for me. And but I felt like I'm winning this game anyway, and I don't need to cast to pitch cast my Fury. So my opponent was able to get rid of a lot of my creatures. So, but again, I had the territorial cow and brawler, and again, I was in pretty much a position, but kind of unfortunate I drew into that much brawlers because my opponent had the bolts for it, and I decided to shock myself to 6 life in situation where my opponent dies next turn and has just one card in hand, but I could have played more safely. And my opponent just had 3 damage in hand and top decked the Shardless Agent into another 3 damage to face, and that was it. So, um, pretty weird game. I was kind of thinking about should I go with Fury on Scion on that turn 2 or 3, and after I decided against it, like um, all things just turned bad for me, and I still got out in a much better situation, and I had the kill next turn, but my opponent top decked the win, and I can't say anything about that. So that's it. Okay, okay, that was the entire league. As you could see, I top decked the Force, the Goblin Archomancers, in a few situations where they weren't very relevant because the game was over anyway. But overall, in the other games I tried it in, it's just they just didn't deserve. Archomancer didn't deserve the spot in the main, and Force of Figure could be good option in the main, even as 2 off if you would like expect a lot of hammer time on the scales and affinity, amulet titan, stuff like that. So it's a pretty good option to go with it in the main. You can cascade it. It's free to cast, and the deck is kind of big mana costs. Like we play Bloodbraid Elf. Um, a lot of general is slow, Shardless Agent, 3 mana. So, but Fury really helps with the slower hands, like to gain a significant advantage over our opponent, and like just switch the sides when opponent starts playing first, and then you can turn to play the Kavu, pitch the Fury, kill your opponent's creatures, and then just tables turn and you start to be aggressor, and they have to worry about your creatures and you don't have to worry that much about theirs, and it's a completely different situation. It just can completely swing the game in your direction in a lot of these situations. So I really like the sideboard. There is no land hate in this sideboard. Like you could play Alpine Moons, stuff like that. But I decided to put Terminate in because of a lower amount of removal in the main. I was satisfied with the number of removal in the main because you can trade with a lot of these creatures. With your own creatures, and Leyland Binding and Fury are just two best available removals in the format currently, and they just did a job very well of dealing with the problematic stuff. So that's it. I'm once again sorry about the pop-ins. I just wasn't able to solve them, and it happens a lot of. They happen like really often, and I can't wasn't able to deal with it yet. Hopefully, I'll do it soon. Okay, so if you like the channel, hit subscribe, hit the like, and a lot of people were asking for Cascade version of the Domain Zoo for a long time, and here it is. I hope you like this version. As I said, gameplay wasn't this version. It was a slightly different version with 2 Goblin Archomancers and the one Force of Vigor, but I think this one is optimal and the version I would play when trying to go competitively into tournament. Of course, I said what are, in my opinion, some other options to play in the main, and that's it. Okay, until other time and another video maybe.